May I also request all the dignitaries to now join hands in lighting the traditional lamp and inaugurate the function. Thank you all. I request all the dignitaries to kindly be seated. Namaskar and good morning to all of you. A very warm welcome to the late Shri B.G. Deshmukh lecture series organized by the MIT-WPU School of Public Policy in association with the Public Concern for Governance Trust, Pune chapter on a very important theme, governance and administrative reforms, challenges and opportunities. The lecture series is in memory of Shri Bhalchandra Gopal Deshmukh ji, who was a former Indian civil servant and had served with various capacities with the government of Maharashtra and Gujarat. He was appointed as the cabinet secretary in 1986, and in 1989 he went on to become the principal secretary to the then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. After his retirement, he served on the boards of various companies and also started the Public Concern for Governance Trust, which came into existence in the year 2002, when good and straightforward officers were being humiliated by the political leadership. The trust was co-founded along with Shri J.F. Ribeiro, IPS, and Dr. R.K. Anand, pediatrician of Deshmukh Hospital and Research Center, Mumbai. The trust have concentrated on influencing young minds to inculcate ethical and moral values which would help them to become good citizens and future leaders of Bharat. Another aim of the trust is to taking up cudgels on behalf of good and honest officers and targeting corruption. Let us now start the function with the national song, and I request my technical team to kindly relay the national song. I request all of you to rise in your seats for the national song.
Vande Mataram, Vande Mataram, Sujalam, Sufalam, Malayaj Sheetalam, Shasya Shamalam Mataram, Vande Mataram, Shubhrajyosna Pulakitayamini, Pullakusumita Dhrumadala Shobhini, Suhasini, Sumadhura Bhashini, Sukhadam Varadam Mataram, Vande Mataram, Vande Mataram.
I also request you to rise in seats and stay for the World Peace Prayer, which is gifted to us by our beloved founder, Revered Professor Dr. Vishwanath D. Karad, sir.
जय जय स्वसंवेद्या आत्मरूपा देवा तूची गणेशु सकलार्थमतिप्रकाशो म्हणे निवृत्तिदासो अवधारी गोजी गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्मा तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Thank you. The MIT-WPU family has suffered a huge loss in the past couple of days. We have lost late Srimati Urmila Vishwanath Karatji, noted poet and author and mother of our Executive President, Shri Rahul V. Karat sir, which is why our beloved founder, Dr. Vishwanath D. Karat sir, and our Executive President, Shri Rahul V. Karat sir, couldn't make it to the function as they are still mourning this huge personal loss. But they have sent their blessings and wishes for this program. May I now request all of you to rise so that we can observe a minute of silence for paying homage to the departed soul of late Srimati Urmila Vishwanath Karat, noted poet and author. Thank you. May I now request Honorable Vice Chancellor of MIT-WPU University, Dr. R.M. Chitnis sir, to deliver the welcome address.
Namaskar and good morning to all of you. It is indeed honor to have distinguished personalities to be with us as our guest of honor and auspicious occasion. On behalf of our founder president, Dr. Vishwanath Karat sir, on behalf of our executive president, Shri Rahul Vishwanath Karat sir, trustees of Myers MIT group of institutions, academic leaders, fellow faculty members, and the students of MIT-WPU University, a warm welcome to all of you on this 11th edition of late Shri B.G. Deshmukh lecture series, which we have organized in association with Public Concern for Governance Trust. We welcome today's chief guest, Dr. Deshmukh ji, former IS officer and Honorable Chancellor of the Central University of Gujarat. Guest of honor, Dr. Sanjeev Chopra ji, former IS officer and former director of Lal Bahadur National Academy of Administration. Shri Mahesh Jagde ji, former IS officer and who is our close associate and chairman of Pune chapter of the PCGT. And Shri Satish Khote ji, the vice chairman of PCGT Pune chapter. Let me share about the theme as mentioned by my colleague earlier. The theme of 11th edition of Memorial Lecture Series is Governance and Administration of Administrative Reforms, Challenges and Opportunities. In today's modern world and transforming democracies, good governance has become a very crucial and essential need for national progression. In fact, minimum government and maximum governance are the main principles on which the economies of major countries are thriving and propagating. Irrespective of the form of government, democracy or socialism or communism or even autocracy, and monocracy or monarchy, good governance plays its role everywhere. You are aware that MIT World Peace University, we have a school of government, which is the brainchild of our executive president, Shri Rahul Vishwanath Karad sir, successfully running for last 16 years. MIT School of Government is probably the only institution in India dedicated to inculcate and nurture leadership qualities among the aspiring youth to create systematically educated political leaders, analysts, political think tanks, and so on. The establishment of School of Government has the blessings of the former firebrand Chief Election Commissioner and IS officer T.N. Seshanji, and it is today mentored and guided by stalwarts in the political parties, civil services, thinkers, academicians. BA Government Administration, BA Honors in Public Administration, MA in Political Leadership and Government, and Postgraduate Diploma in Public Policy are the flagship programs which have created political leaders, analysts, and the party officers serving the society across India. The vision and mission of the School of Government and the School of Public Policy is based on what our former President Abdul Kalam ji says: politics is all about creating leaders and evolving the policies. Dear students, you may wonder why we are invited here with these stalwarts from the Government of India, the IS officers. You are aware that in the democracy, if young and very vibrant, educated students like you take interest, then there is a next level of development in the country. It is not only money which brings development in the country, but those who are actually educated, they should give at least some time for decorating the democracy of this country. And with this challenge, School of Government was started. I had also opportunity to be director of that for some years. And let me tell you that instead of being armchair critics of politicians in this country, let us join. You need not be contesting elections, but you be more aware about your particular cities, your particular state, or your particular country. If I ask you about what is the budget of Pune city, where you pay taxes, that is municipal corporations, you may be way away. Mahesh Jagdeji, the former commissioner of Pune city, would be knowing by heart. So taking interest into democracy of that particular country is the only option we have if we want a clean government. I want to add one more thing and then stop, that you are looking what is happening in Sri Lanka. If there is no prime minister, if there is no president, no ministry in that particular country, though small country, have you noticed that the entire country is run by the bureaucrats? It is the IS officer, IPS officers, and army. They are governing. Otherwise, the chaos would have gone to that level where general massacre might have happened. And this has happened in many smaller countries in Africa or even South America also. So these bureaucrats, they actually run the country. Politicians come and go. Parties come and go. And since we have a very high bureaucrats in this country, our country went to that level where at the same time, two countries were taken out of this country. One is Bangladesh and Pakistan. They don't have that kind of a bureaucracy. And the last point would be PPP. Now you want to get placements into private corporates, but now private corporates and government is coming together with a private-public partnership. And that is a new era where your entire next 40 years will go. Whether it's a bullet train or metro rail, whether it's a Mumbai-Pune Express Highway, all this is done by creating a new company by government itself. And certain capital is employed like a private company. And then toll tax is attached to that, and then that particular loan is paid off. So you are talking to stalwarts who will guide you in the next 40 years, what kind of era you are going to have with the PPP. And of course, the governance is the main theme of today. And if possible, we might take a few questions. With this, once again, I welcome all the stalwarts on the dais and in the front rows, and wishing you best of the best deliberations for next 2.5 hours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for that very warm welcome. It is a tradition in the MIT family that we consider our guests as family, and we believe in Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, the idea that our beloved founder has always said. So let us let us take this opportunity to felicitate all our guests of honor and special guests who are there on the dais. May I request Honorable Vice Chancellor Dr. R.M. Chetnis sir to felicitate our chief guest and keynote speaker of the day, Dr. Deshmukh ji, Honorable Chancellor, Central University of Gujarat, and former Finance and Revenue Secretary of India. With a huge round of applause, let us felicitate Shri Dr. Deshmukh ji. May I now request Dr. Tapan Pandaji, Pro Vice Chancellor of MIT-WPU University, to kindly felicitate Dr. Sanjeev Chopra ji, Special Guest of Honor, former Director of Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration and former IAS officer. With a round of applause, let us welcome Dr. Sanjeev Chopra ji. I also request Dr. Tapan Panda sir to felicitate Shri Mahesh Zagde ji. Shri Mahesh Zagde ji is the chairman of the Public Concern for Governance Trust and the former Principal Secretary of the Government of Maharashtra. With a huge round of applause, let us welcome Shri Mahesh Zagde ji. May I now request Dr. K. Girishan sir, Director of the School of Government, MIT-WPU University, to felicitate Shri Ajit Nimbalkar ji, former IAS officer and member of the Public Concern for Governance Trust and Board of Directors of Aradhana Skills and the former Chief Secretary of Maharashtra. I also request Dr. K. Girishan sir to felicitate Shri Satish Khorji, he is also one of the esteemed dignitaries who have joined us today. Let us welcome him with a huge round of applause. May I now request the Dean of School of Public Policy, Dr. Shalini Sharma ma'am, to kindly felicitate Mrs. Rashmi Chopra ji, who is amongst us today in the audience. With a huge round of applause, let us welcome Srimati Rashmi Chopra ji to MIT-WPU University. May I now request Srimati Anju Upadhyay, Distinguished Professor of School of Public Policy, to felicitate Srimati Shalini Rao, Bharatanatyam expert and dance therapist who has joined us today in this lecture series. Thank you, ma'am, and once again, thank you to all of you. May I request Dr. Shalini Sharma ma'am to join us back on the dais. Now, let's have a look at the curtain raiser video clip about the late B.G. Deshmukh lecture series organized by the MIT-WPU School of Public Policy in association with the Public Concern for Governance Trust, Pune chapter. I request my technical team to kindly relay the curtain raiser video.
Public Policy and Public Concern for Governance Trust, Pune chapter is jointly organizing late Shri B.G. Deshmukh Memorial Lecture Series 2022. The annual public lecture series has been instituted in the honor of late Shri B.G. Deshmukh, IAS, former Cabinet Secretary, Government of India, and Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister. The basic objective behind the annual public lecture series is to explore and enlighten the youth and public about the challenges in governance in India. Late Shri Bhalchandra Gopal Deshmukh, IAS, was an Indian civil servant and served with distinction in various capacities in Maharashtra and Gujarat. He was secretary to the then Chief Minister of Maharashtra, Vasantrao Naik, and Municipal Commissioner of Bombay. He was appointed Cabinet Secretary in 1986 and in 1989. He was also a secretary in the Ministry of Labour, Central Government, and chairman of the governing board of the International Labour Organization. Shri Deshmukh has several books to his credit named as A Cabinet Secretary Thinks Aloud, A Cabinet Secretary Looks Around, and Pune to the Prime Minister's Office, A Cabinet Secretary Looks Back. He was also the chief guest for the first UPSC National Felicitation Program in 2009. Late Shri B.G. Deshmukh was a founder trustee of a registered trust called Public Concern for Governance Trust, founded in Mumbai in April 2002. Other two founders of the organization are Shri J.F. Ribeiro, IPS, retired, former Commissioner of Police, Mumbai, and Dr. R.K. Anand, pediatrician, former Medical Director, Deshmukh Hospital and Research Center, Mumbai. Public Concern for Governance Trust came into existence in the year 2002 when good and straightforward officers were being humiliated by the political leadership. The idea of taking up cudgels on behalf of good and honest officers and targeting corruption as the main cause for the choices of the politicians was born. At MIT-WPU School of Public Policy, our endeavor is to create mindful citizens and ambassadors of action. We appeal to kindly participate with your benevolent spirit to carry forward the initiative to make us responsible stakeholders in the public policy.
Thank you. We have amongst us the chairman of the Public Concern for Governance Trust Pune chapter and the former Principal Secretary Government of Maharashtra, Shri Mahesh Zagdeji with us. Let me take a minute to tell about you, sir, because I think the public and the students must know you, but still. He has an experience of over 37 years with the government and has handled various subjects from R&D to public and corporate administration, rural development, energy conservation, disaster management, to name a few. He has managed several events like the Kumbh Mela and has held various prestigious posts including the Principal Secretary, the Municipal Commissioner of Pune, the Director General Energy Development Renewables, to name a few. He is also the recipient of the International No Tobacco Day Award by the WHO in 2014, the National Gold Award for E-Governance in 2013, and the President's Silver Medal for Census in 2011. May I now invite Shri Mahesh Zagdeji to introduce the People's Concerns for Governance Trust. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Chief guest of today's very important lecture, B.G. Deshmukh Memorial Lecture, Dr. Hasmukh Adiyaji, special guest Dr. Sanju Chopraji, ex-Chief Secretary of Maharashtra, Mr. Ajit Nimbalkarji, Vice Chancellor of MIT, Dr. Chitnis, Dr. Girisan, Pro Vice Chancellor, our Vice Chairman of PCGT, Mr. Satish Koth, Professor Shalini Sharmaji, all the members of PCGT and the academic members of the Academic Council and the faculty and my friends. I have come many times to MIT. I keep on coming and I have interacted with you many times. Today, I will not speak much because you have created one beautiful film on what is PCGT is. I don't want to repeat it, and that's one reason. Second is I am not too well. I'm not well, therefore I cannot hold my breath for long. So I will be very crisp and short. Public Concern for Governance Trust, which was founded by, as was shown to you in the film, by Mr. B.G. Deshmukh and Julia Ribeiro, Padma Bhushan, and of course who had handled the Punjab episodes and many other things, and Dr. Anand. This is not just yet another NGO. We have too many NGOs in this country, about 31 lakh. one NGO for every 400 person, group of persons. We have double the numbers of NGOs than the schools in this country. And we have for every 700 persons, we have one COP. But we have, for 400 persons, we have one NGO. So we have too many NGOs in these countries, but it's not that all the NGOs function to take forward the volunteerism in the country. And when Mr. B.G. Deshmukh and Mr. Ribeiro and their colleagues, they decided to promote good governance in this country, to support the officials who are upright, and to bring down the delays and to promote honesty and to support officers who are on the right path. They conceptualized the idea of public concern for governance trust. And when it was founded, there were two chapters, one in Mumbai, and when Mr. B.G. Deshmukh shifted to Pune, Pune chapter was initiated. This particular trust engages itself with too many activities, one of which is just like to hold such lectures like what we are having today. And then we take up issues with the governments, be it at the national level, state level, or the local level governments. We take issues where we feel that something is missing or something needs to be done, or we need to have some policy inputs, or we feel that certain statutes need amendment or improvements. There we make very concrete suggestions after a lot of deliberations. And these deliberations are the outcome of the long 30, 40 years experience of senior bureaucrats who are the members of this trust, who have worked as chief secretaries, director general of police, eminent social workers, eminent jurists. They are the members of this, and then we engage ourselves in a very meaningful dialogues, and we come out with proposals, and many times these proposals are accepted by the state governments or the authorities. We also have engagement with the student community. We have campus programs, like we appoint campus ambassadors in various colleges, and we try to take up issues through them so that they also get idea that how to have engagement with the governmental agencies and how to promote good governance, how to have a better quality life for the citizens through this kind of initiatives. So this is like a training exercise for the students. I would request many of those who are in this hall that you can also get engaged with PCGT Pune chapter through your School of Governance or School of Public Policy, Policy Planning, and we can come together and take very niche topics on which we can work, and we can really have engagement with the government or the local authorities. With these words, I thank MIT-WPU for accepting our suggestion that this year the B.G. Deshmukh Memorial Lecture could be held together, and then you have arranged it so wonderfully. In fact, you could get the two wonderful speakers for this lecture who are their experience of more than 3 decades, which we are going to share, they are going to share with us. And these are the current topics that we is really grappling the country about the governance and the current and the future and all these things, because as your Vice Chancellor said, that the governance is at the core of everything. And if the governance is not there, what happens? He has given the example also. So we have to have this steel frame to keep it intact, and the steel frame is not supposed to be remaining steel frame from within, but from external supports like you people, like NGOs, academics are also supposed to strengthen that steel frame. So with this, I think today's lecture, both the lectures would go a long way in showing the path towards how this steel frame or how governance of this country could be improved. I thank the MIT-WPU again and both the speakers for taking out time and then sharing their viewpoints about the topics today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for introducing PCGT and talking about it. Thank you very much. We have amongst us Shri Ajit Nimbalkar ji, who during his 37 years of service has held several posts, including the Secretary to the Chief Minister, the Chairman of the Maharashtra State Electricity Board. The government of Maharashtra also appointed him as the Chairman of Sarthi, which is engaged in training and employment in 2020. He retired as the Chief Secretary of Maharashtra and is currently the member of the Public Concern for Governance Trust and member of the Board of Directors of Aradhana Skills and also he is the former Chief Secretary of Maharashtra. May I invite Shri Ajit Nimbalkar ji, former IAS, to introduce late Shri B.G. Deshmukh ji to all.
Distinguished guests of the dais and friends, I am thankful to the MIT for inviting me for this function today. In fact, it's my first visit and I have a connection with MIT also. My son studied here, did his engineering here from 92 to 96. He went on to Infosys and then went to USA for his higher studies and is migrated there like many of our engineers. But to come back to the subject today on B.G. Deshmukh, you've already seen a slide on his various posts that he held. I had a good fortune to work under him, both at the state government as well as the central government. And there are certain personal connections with him which I would like to bring out over here. Mr. Deshmukh was a Punekar, in a good sense. He was very proud of being a Punekar, and he belonged to the IS 1951 batch. You know, the British ruled over us for 100 years with the help of the army and administration. The Indian civil service was mainly concerned with revenue collection and law and order. When India attained freedom, there was a certain school of thought which saw the ICS as a tool of the British and therefore did not want to continue this system. But it was due to the foresight of Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Patel that promoted the Indian Administrative Service, the successor to the ICS. Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru took personal interest in the Indian Foreign Service, and Sardar Patel, of course, promoted the IS. So there was, when the first few batches of the IS after independence, initially many were taken from the army, World War II veterans who came to us, but a direct recruitment started with Mr. Deshmukh's batch. And there was a responsibility on these particular officers to convince the people of India and the parliamentarians that IS was a worthy successor to the ICS. The orientation was completely different from the ICS, which mainly concentrated on law and order and revenue collection. The IS had to work in a democratic setup with elected representatives and had to mold themselves into a development-oriented system. The British didn't bother much about development, but the IS had to do that job. So the working of these few batches at the beginning was watched with interest, and responsibility fell on the early incumbents like Mr. Deshmukh, and they carried out the task nobly. Mr. Deshmukh was first allotted to Bombay cadre. There was no linguistic state, 51. Then when linguistic states were formed, he came to Maharashtra. I first met him, I remember, I belonged to the 1967 batch. So 1968, when from the academy, we came to the States, Mr. Deshmukh was in charge of the training of our officers and postings of the young officers. My batch, we had 13 officers. Only 2 were from the States, I and another person. The others were all from different parts of the country. Mr. Deshmukh helped us in our postings, learning the language, learning the climate, and we formed a good team. about that. Later on, Mr. Deshmukh was taken up as secretary to CM with Vasantarav Naik. About that. And there also he played a different role. The secretary to CMs earlier used to work mainly as personal attachments to the chief minister. Mr. Deshmukh formed the CM Secretariat, Chief Minister's Secretariat, just like you have the Prime Minister's Secretariat in Delhi. He formed that with, like any other secretariat in government, whether it is the Urban Development, Irrigation Department, etc. CM Secretariat was formed, and I also later on succeeded in working as Secretary to CM. But he played a major role in the setting up of the CM Secretariat. Later on, he went on to become the Municipal Commissioner, Mumbai, and went to Government of India, first in the Home Ministry as Additional Secretary, and later on he became Secretary Labour. He was Secretary Labour for 4 years. As Secretary Labour, he became the chairman of the Governing Council of the ILO. And he was there for the full year. And during that time itself, he was posted as Chief Secretary Maharashtra in 1985. And I worked with him for a month or two, and then I was transferred to the Labour Ministry, Government of India, what is as Joint Secretary. In fact, Mr. Deshmukh was very helpful to me for that, because the Chief Minister would not relieve me. He said I should remain in Maharashtra, and I would have not gone to Government of India thereafter. But fortunately, Mr. Deshmukh intervened, and I could later on go to GOI. Normally, persons who are posted as chief secretaries retire from that, because it is a dream of every IAS officer either to be chief secretary or secretary to Government of India, and persons retire from that. Cabinet secretary is a person who comes, he's first of all the topper, young officers, age-wise, and in 2 or 3 batches you have one cabinet secretary. But Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, who was then the Prime Minister, called Mr. Deshmukh back from Chief Secretary Maharashtra to head as the administration as Cabinet Secretary. He worked there as Cabinet Secretary, and after retirement, he was appointed as Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister. Mr. Deshmukh served 3 Prime Ministers. He's first of all with Rajiv Gandhi, and later on with VP Singh, and then Chandrasekhar. After retirement from there, he went on to join the Tatas. He was a director on the Tata Sons, and as a director on Tatas, Tata Institute, etc. And later on, he came back and settled in Pune. There's also Mr. Deshmukh as a crusader. As an author, he wrote 4 books. That has already been mentioned. But he was all the time involved in good governance. And for that purposes, he was worked with several organizations like BNS, Natural History Society. He formed Agni. Agni was an organization which went to the High Court against Bandh. A political party had called for Bandh in Maharashtra. He went to the High Court and got a decision in his favor. The party was fined because of organizing this department. He formed PCGT. He was there in Janwani, and he was also associated with KEM Hospital, National Association for Blind, and several other organizations. There's also an aspect of Mr. Deshmukh as a man, as a person. He achieved several things both in government and outside, but he had several tragedies in his personal life. He lost his first wife early. He had 1 daughter, the only child. He married again, and in 1989, his daughter passed away. He had come to Pune at that time, and for a certain award. I was in Delhi at that time also, I remember. But he was a broken man, shattered. I was a personal witness to when he came down from Pune, came by helicopter. Rajiv Gandhi, as the Prime Minister, helped him. He could not walk a few steps also about that. Later on, he lost his second wife also. So there were personal tragedies in him. But he surmounted all that, and without showing any emotions, he continued the task that was before him. He, in his last few years, he devoted himself entirely for good governments and charity causes. He started donating a lot of things for causes which he felt were close to him. He shifted from Bombay to Pune, migrated over here. He was a lonely man when he passed away. On August 7, 2011, I remember when he passed away, I got the news and I rushed to Noble Hospital in Pune. His body was lying there, and his immediate relatives, the nephews, etc., were at Bombay. There was no person. Satish Magar of Magarpatta looked after him, but there were very few persons. But in the evening, after his cremation, when a condolence mission was taken, hundreds of people gathered together over there and to pay his respect as a person who worked with the society, who worked with several organizations for good governance. He was a stern disciplinarian. He hardly showed his emotions, but he was result-oriented. And he was passionately devoted to good governance. And I think PCGT is trying to continue that tradition, the work where he did about it. Thank you.
I know words are not enough for all the people who knew B.G. Deshmukh sir to talk about him, to talk about his life and work. And if you look at the guests that we have today, the esteemed dignitaries, all of them can inspire us through their decades of journey in academics and in administrative experience. We look forward to have all of you at the School of Public Policy, sir, and also at the School of Government to train and mentor our students in the future as well. Thank you once again, Shri Ajit Nimbalkar, sir. Let us now have a look at the Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad short film, one of the social initiatives taken up by the School of Government, the first of its kind in training young minds of Bharat to become future political leaders. May I request my technical team to kindly relay a short film on the Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad.
Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad, the Indian Students' Parliament, India's largest classroom to inspire, to evolve leaders in politics. Educated and spirited youth can make such big differences when they come into politics. Unshackled minds, uncorrupt minds with a burning desire to work for the country and take the leadership roles in politics. Politics for good governance, transparency and progress. Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad, abbreviated as PCS, aims to awaken the youth of India to come forward and join the path to strengthen our democracy.
That's how I look at this, this very concept of Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad. What way the country can change. I can tell you very few people. This is not a very small number. This number can play a very big role, my dear students. You have a great future, and Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad, the MIT School of Government, India's first school to develop the future politicians, it will go a long way.
Every year since its inception and has grown from strength to strength, PCS is an initiative of MIT School of Government, Pune.
I will work with integrity and succeed with integrity.
Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad, in its decade-long existence, has become an important aspect of ever-evolving educational landscape.
So now the time has come again for all of us, particularly the younger generation, to join politics in a big way.
You need the capacity to learn. Remember, learning is a lifelong undertaking. I will be 90 next month, I continue to learn because learning every day is a learning experience. Don't think you'll finish learning after you graduate.
Today's youth are very confident, and I'm happy to see that. My personal take is being confident is very good, but overconfident is not good. We have to be confident. At the same time, we must know what we are doing.
As we have heard, most of you are looking forward to a career to run this country. All of us here on this stage are now on our way out. And it's you who are in your way in. And it's you who are going to be eventually the shoulder the responsibility of running our states and our countries. We got an opportunity to have an interaction with students and Bharatiya Chhatra Parishad in Pune. Mr. Rahul compelled me and invited me to have a speech there. I can tell you, after that experience, it was the biggest, richest, precious inspiration which I had in my political life. From that, I thought how we can remount the process of democracy.
Thank you. I would like to announce that this year's Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad is from the 15th, 16th and on the 17th of September to be held. We are indeed honored and privileged to have amongst us Dr. Deshmukh Adyaji, former IAS officer and Honorable Chancellor of Central University of Gujarat, and the former Finance and Revenue Secretary of India, who will be addressing us on the theme Good Governance and Administrative Reforms, Challenges and Opportunities. But before inviting him to address the audience, we would like to play a short film on the life and work of Dr. Deshmukh Adyaji. I request my technical team to kindly relay the short film.
Retired IAS officer and is currently serving as the Chancellor of the Central University of Gujarat. He is best known for his role as the Finance and Revenue Secretary in the Government of India. Dr. Adya is also the non-executive chairman of Bank of Baroda and a member of Board of Governors of Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. During his tenure as Revenue Secretary, Dr. Adya was regarded as one of the most hard-working bureaucrats in India. Dr. Deshmukh Adya got a postgraduate degree in accountancy and is also a gold medalist from the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. He holds a PhD in yoga from Swami Vivekananda Yoga University, Bangalore. Prior to his posting as Finance Secretary, Dr. Adya was Secretary, Department of Financial Services, Ministry of Finance, Government of India. Prior to being posted in the Ministry of Finance, some of the other positions held by Dr. Adya include Principal Secretary to the then Chief Minister of Gujarat, Shri Narendra Ji Modi, Principal Secretary Gujarat and Additional Chief Secretary Gujarat, to name a few. He is also known for his relentless drive against black money. He is one of the key persons behind the architecture and rollout of the Goods and Services Tax. He is an IAS officer of the 1981 from Gujarat cadre batch and was also a consultant to the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. He was one of the highest profile officers leading from the front with utmost dedication. Since his retirement in 2018, Dr. Adya has been pursuing his passion towards yoga and meditation. We warmly welcome Dr. Deshmukh Adya.
With a huge round of applause, let us welcome Dr. Deshmukh Adyaji, Honorable Chancellor of Central University of Gujarat and former Finance and Revenue Secretary of India, to address the audience.
Good morning. It's such a pleasure to meet all of you, the youth of this country, and try to interact with all of you on a topic which is dear to all of us. It's a privilege for me to be the speaker of Shri B.G. Deshmukh Memorial Lecture Series. From what I know about Mr. Deshmukh, he was a true patriot, and he was a very efficient civil servant. On this occasion, I pay my respect to Shri Deshmukh, this great soul. Also, I take this opportunity to offer my deepest condolences to the Karad family for losing one of their beloved members of the family. I pray to God that may her soul rest in peace. I have prepared a very formal speech for this program, but don't worry, I'm not going to read it out. I'll give it for record of the trust and MIT so that they can keep it on record that this was the memorial lecture delivered. But I will talk about some of the salient points out of this. The first thing we have to know is that good governance is a mirage chased by all governments of the world. It's a mirage. Good governance. Right from the time a democracy was installed, or right from the time even before that, the bureaucratic reforms, the civil service reforms, and the good governance are talked about. We can divide this talk into 4 parts. First of all, before I start, let me tell you, I'm going to talk about good governance only in the context of civil service reform, the bureaucratic reforms. The good governance has got many aspects, which includes good political governance also, which includes good economic governance also. But I'm not going to touch upon those aspects. I'm going to limit it to the bureaucratic reforms or the civil service reforms. That's the first point. As I told you, we can divide this topic into 4 parts. The first part, what is the present status of bureaucracy? That's the first part. The second part is that what is the definition of a good governance in the context of bureaucratic reforms? That's the second part. The third part is, what are the challenges? Why we are not able to achieve it? There are a lot of challenges, and we have to understand what are those challenges. And the fourth is, what are my suggestions for it? What can we do to bring about good governance? So I'm going to cover this topic into 4 parts. Let me start with the first point. What is the present status of bureaucracy? Now I'm going to read out a statement of Mr. Jimmy Carter, and that describes the state of bureaucracy of USA. I'm not going to even talk about India. I'm going to talk about USA. So every government in the world has tried civil service reform. The USA also tried it. In 1978, the United States of America passed a law. It is called Civil Services Reform Act of 1978. At that time, Mr. Jimmy Carter was the president. And while introducing this act to the parliament, what did he say? to the Congress, what did he say? He says, I will quote Mr. Jimmy Carter. He said that the federal personnel system in the USA had become a bureaucratic maze, M-A-Z-E, maze, which neglects merit, tolerates poor performance, and permits abuse of legitimate employee rights, and mires every personnel action into red tape, delay, and confusion. These are the words of Mr. Jimmy Carter in the context of United States bureaucracy. So please understand that bureaucracy is bureaucracy everywhere. Kawa sab jagah kale hote hai. So we have to accept the fact that India is not unique. The bureaucracy is bureaucracy everywhere. But why is bureaucracy what it is? We have to see that also. There are reasons for bureaucracy forming a particular set of values. Why is it so? What does it come out of? We will talk about it. If we talk about what is good governance, now as I told you, good governance has got many aspects, but I'm going to limit it to civil service reform. So I'm going to define good governance as the fundamental transformation of public systems and organizations to create dramatic increase in their effectiveness, efficiency, adaptability, and capacity to innovate. This is the definition of good governance. It is achieved, the good governance is achieved. When is it achieved? When the processes and the institutions produce results that meet the needs of the society. The processes and the results of the governance should meet the needs of the society while making the best use of resources at their disposal. And it also covers the sustainable use of natural resources and the protection of environment. So this is what is the definition of good governance. What are the challenges of good governance? The first and foremost is that many government organizations, they've got confusing, conflicting objectives. The same government organization is expected to deliver regional balance. It is also expected to deliver higher per capita income. It is also supposed to promote investment. So there are a lot of conflicting goals in many organizations. Some of them don't have goals also. They are so confused, they don't have any specific objectives also. They don't have clear-cut bottom lines also, that okay, we have to achieve this much. Very few of the government organizations measure their performance also in terms of objective criteria. And सबसे बड़ी जो दिक्कत है, most organizations are not accountable to the citizens or their stakeholders, the customers. They don't even know who our customers are. So that's the problem, that's the first challenge. The second challenge is lack of motivation among the government employees. गवर्नमेंट में एक कहावत है कि जो काम करते हैं, जो काम नहीं करते उनको प्रमोशन मिलता है और जो काम करते हैं उनको चार्जशीट मिलती है. काम नहीं करते उनको प्रमोशन मिलता रहता है और जो काम करते हैं उनको क्या मिलता है? चार्जशीट. चार्जशीट मीन्स डिसिप्लिनरी एक्शन. There is no cost involved in not taking a decision. But if you take a decision and if you perform, there are chances that you might be given a charge sheet. There are chances you may have to face the public criticism. These are all there. That's part of the government culture. And that's why, over a period, people think कि सरकार में दूर रहना अच्छा है, जितना हो सके उतना करो काम, बाकी छोड़ दो. This is the main problem. And we need to create a culture of taking responsibility, entrepreneurship, innovation in the government. बहुत कम रिवॉर्ड होते हैं और वो भी कुछ लोगों को मिलते हैं अच्छा काम करने के लिए. बट कितने IAS ऑफिसर्स है कि जो एनोनिमसली बिहाइंड द कर्टन अच्छा काम करते हैं, उनको तो रिकॉग्निशन भी नहीं मिली. So we have to see this. The risk of failure is too high compared to the rewards of performance. And that's the part of organization culture. We also have more emphasis on procedures. And sometimes an act of procedural omission or commission also becomes more serious in government compared to serious misintentions. अगर कोई करप्शन कर रहा है और उनको चार्जशीट मिले तो कोई बात नहीं है, बट छोटी छोटी चीज़ों के लिए लोगों को डिसिप्लिनरी एक्शन में घसीटा जाता है और उसके कारण ही थोड़ा लैक ऑफ मोटिवेशन हो गया है सरकार में. As I told you, very few governments have got clear-cut goals. और वो भी क्या है नीचे वाले को तो पता ही नहीं है. ऊपर के अधिकारी जो है जानते हैं कि ऑर्गेनाइजेशन क्या अचीव करने की कोशिश कर रही है, लेकिन नीचे वाले एम्प्लॉय को आप पूछेंगे कि आपका ऑर्गेनाइजेशन क्या कर रहा है तो उनको शायद ही कुछ पता है. And this is a serious problem because then there is no motivation. If a person in a department, a clerk, knows that what I am going to do is making a difference to the people of the country, then they would be better motivated. लेकिन ये बताया नहीं जाता उनको. वो अपना काम करते रहते हैं, बड़े ऑफिसर्स को उनके लिए कुछ टाइम नहीं है कम्युनिकेट करने का, और चलता रहता है. One more problem is there is a serious lack of training. लोग समझ रहे हैं कि ट्रेनिंग तो बहुत दी जाती है. मेरे कलीग संजीव जो है वो LBS नेशनल एकेडमी ऑफ एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के डायरेक्टर थे. IAS ऑफिसर्स को तो बहुत अच्छी ट्रेनिंग दी जाती है. ही इज़ वन ऑफ द डिस्टिंग्विश सर्विस कलीग ऑफ माइन. संजीव हैज डन अ लॉट ऑफ गुड वर्क in his own state cadre and also in government of India. He is a thinker, a dynamic officer, and I am very proud to share a stage with him, Sanjeev. तो वहाँ तो IAS ऑफिसर्स को तो बहुत अच्छी ट्रेनिंग दी जाती है, लेकिन you would be shocked, 70% of the class 3 and class 4 employees of the government, they don't even get a single day of training after joining service. कोई उनको नहीं बताता है कि सॉफ्ट स्किल क्या होती है, लोगों के साथ बिहेवियर कैसे करना चाहिए, सरकार की सिस्टम कैसे चलती है. टेक द एग्जांपल ऑफ ए ड्राइवर और ए स्टेनोग्राफर और ए पियून. वो पियून को कोई ट्रेनिंग नहीं देता, वो एडमिट होता है सरकार में और 40 इयर्स में रिटायर हो जाता है, 30-40 इयर्स में. तो देयर इज़ अ सीरियस लैक ऑफ ट्रेनिंग एट द लोअर लेवल, नॉट इन द डोमेन फील्ड बट ट्रेनिंग ऑफ सॉफ्ट स्किल्स. आपको ये जान के ताज्जुब होगा कि 2004 में गुजरात सरकार ने एक एम्प्लॉई सेटिस्फेक्शन सर्वे किया, सब एम्प्लॉई का. 3 लाख एम्प्लॉयज़ वोटेड एम्प्लॉई सेटिस्फेक्शन सर्वे. उसमें एक क्वेश्चन पूछा गया कि अगर आपको मोटिवेट करना, इफ़ यू वांट टू मोटिवेट यू, तो निम्नलिखित 9 फैक्टर में से कौन सा फैक्टर आप सिलेक्ट करेंगे एज द टॉप मोस्ट, सबसे टॉप पे. तो उसमें 9 फैक्टर्स दिए गए थे. उसमें से एक था कि ज़्यादा सैलरी, उससे आपको मोटिवेशन मिलेगा. दूसरा था बेटर परक्विजाइट्स. तीसरा था ट्रेनिंग. चौथा था गाइडेंस. पांचवा था वर्क एटमॉस्फियर, फिजिकल वर्क कंडीशंस. ये सब 9 फैक्टर्स वे लिस्टेड. एंड व्हाट वाज द टॉप factor which would have come in the survey according to you? Most of us were thinking कि सबसे बड़े फैक्टर में ये कहेंगे कि ज़्यादा सैलरी दो, ज़्यादा तनख्वाह दो तो अच्छा मोटिवेशन होगा. ऐसा नहीं हुआ. You would be surprised, 25% of the people gave number 1 position to guidance. They say we want guidance in the government. There is nobody to guide us. There is no supervisor to tell us how to do better, what to do, how to do, why to do. कोई है ही नहीं गाइडेंस देने वाला. एक बार ऑफिस में आ गए, दफ्तर में आ गए तो काम करके निकल जाते हैं, गाइडेंस नहीं है. द सेकंड मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट, मतलब 25% gave this as number 1 rank. 15% gave number one rank to training. They said we want more training. Only 9% people gave first rank to monetary incentive, कि हमें और तनख्वाह चाहिए और सैलरी चाहिए. बहुत कम लोगों ने ये ऑप्ट किया. तो ये दिखा रहा है कि सिर्फ पे कमीशन अपना सैलरी बढ़ाता रहे सरकार के एम्प्लॉई की, उससे गुड गवर्नेंस नहीं आने वाला है. One has to have massive training of government employees. तभी जाके ये सिचुएशन को हम बदल सकते हैं. Now, what are the strategies for good governance? 9 points I'm going to give for strategies for good governance. सबसे पहला कि जितने भी गवर्नमेंट का ऑर्गेनाइजेशन या डिपार्टमेंट है, उनको एक अपना रीथिंकिंग अपने डिपार्टमेंट के बारे में, अपने ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के अस्तित्व के बारे में करना चाहिए. फंडामेंटल रीथिंकिंग. उनको ये सोचना चाहिए कि क्या ये एक्टिविटी जो ये ऑर्गेनाइजेशन कर रहा है, इज इट रिक्वायर्ड इन द गिवन कॉन्टेक्स्ट. नंबर वन. इफ एट ऑल इट इज रिक्वायर्ड, सरकार को ही करना जरूरी है एक्टिविटी या प्राइवेट वाले से करवा सकते हैं आउटसोर्सिंग करके. ये दूसरा पॉइंट. तीसरा, इवन इफ it is required, can we think of doing it more efficiently? Can we have a vision statement, goal statement? Can we have monitorable targets for each one of this? Can we have service satisfaction standards for customers or the citizens? ये सब पुनः विचार हर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को करना चाहिए, क्योंकि सरकार में एक बार एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बन गया तो फिर बंद नहीं होता. एक बार शुरू कर दिया फिर बंद करना मुश्किल होता है. लोग भूल जाते हैं कि ऐसा कोई ऑर्गेनाइजेशन उस टाइम पे क्रिएट किया था स्पेसिफिक पर्पस के लिए, और पर्पस तो पूरा हो गया, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन चलते रहते हैं. सो दिस इज हाउ वी हैव टू रीथिंक ऑन ऑल दिस. सेकंड स्ट्रेटेजी ये है कि अभी प्रॉब्लम ये है कि जो डिपार्टमेंट पॉलिसी बना रहा है वही डिपार्टमेंट इम्प्लीमेंट भी करता है, वही डिपार्टमेंट प्रोग्राम का इवैल्यूएशन भी करता है. तीनों चीज़ एक ही डिपार्टमेंट करता है. तो उससे क्या है कि देयर इज ए कंप्लीट कन्फ्यूजन बिटवीन द रोल ऑफ स्टीयरिंग एंड रोइंग. स्टीयरिंग इज ए डिफरेंट एक्टिविटी, रोइंग इटसेल्फ इज ए डिफरेंट एक्टिविटी. Policy making has to be separated from implementation, and it has to be separated from the evaluation process. अगर तीनों एक ही मिनिस्ट्री करेगी तो क्या होगा? इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में यूके गवर्नमेंट ने मैगी थैचर के टाइम पे एक बड़ा ज़बरदस्त ब्यूरोक्रेटिक रिफॉर्म करके सब गवर्नमेंट डिपार्टमेंट को बहुत छोटा बना दिया. वो बहुत सारा काम है वो अलग एजेंसी बना के उनको दिया गया. इट इज़ कॉल्ड ए प्रोसेस ऑफ क्रिएटिंग नेक्स्ट स्टेप एजेंसीज. तो उस तरह का एक प्रोसेस होना चाहिए. नेक्स्ट स्टेप एजेंसी क्रिएट करना तो इजी है, हमारे यहाँ भी कॉर्पोरेटाइजेशन हैज बीन ट्राइड, लेकिन कॉरपोरेशंस अलग काम के लिए बनने के बाद उसकी अकाउंटेबिलिटी के ऊपर कोई ध्यान नहीं देता. वो ध्यान देना जरूरी है. नेक्स्ट इज creating consequences of the performance. We have to have a perfect performance management system and the promotion system. अभी की जो सरकारी तंत्र की जो प्रमोशन पॉलिसी है, इट इज़ मोर मेरिट कम सीनियोरिटी. इट इज़ कॉल्ड मेरिट कम सीनियोरिटी, बट इट हैज़ टर्न्ड आउट टू बी ओनली सीनियोरिटी बेस्ड प्रमोशन सिस्टम, क्योंकि इट इज़ बेस्ड ऑन द इवैल्यूएशन डन in your annual confidential report. तो जो performance appraisal है, it is done on the scale of 1 to 10, and most of the government employees, it is a wrong thing on the part of supervisory officers to give 9 to everyone, but most of them end up getting 8 to 10. उसमें क्या होता है कि फिर there is no incentive for a hard working officer, a meritorious officer to get out of turn promotion, because all of them are eligible for promotion, so the seniority base हो जाएगा. तो इसके लिए कुछ पुनः विचार करने की ज़रूरत है. We need to have some kind of a not only 360 degree appraisal, but also some kind of a interview process for people to be promoted. जैसे यूनिवर्सिटी है एक, there is one more university I am associated with is पंडित दीनदयाल एनर्जी यूनिवर्सिटी. उस यूनिवर्सिटी में हमारा जो सिस्टम है कि असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर से अगर एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर की प्रमोशन का कोई सिस्टम ही नहीं है. Assistant professor will remain assistant professor unless he is selected by a procedure of interview for the associate professor, and similarly from associate professor to professor. So when there is a post of, suppose I am an assistant professor of psychology और एक associate professor of psychology की जगह होती है, even if I have done 10 years as assistant professor, I am not automatically eligible for promotion. There will be an advertisement in the newspaper. Anybody from outside will apply for the post of an associate professor. And then if I can also apply as an internal candidate, and there will be external candidates also. I have to face competition. If they find that I am better than the external candidate, they will take me as associate professor. Otherwise, I can quit and go to some other university and join as associate professor. So this is the real system. हम लोग क्यों ऐसा नहीं कर सकते सरकार में? We can say that joint secretary and above, everything is by open interview only. किसी को सीनियरिटी के हिसाब से प्रमोशन नहीं मिलेगा. कोई एक ऐसी व्यवस्था खड़ी की जाए जिसके माध्यम से देयर इज ए स्क्रीनिंग डन ऑफ ऑफिसर्स. मैं तो ये समझता हूँ, आई डोंट नो वेदर संजीव विल एग्री, कि अगर किसी आईएएस अफसर ने कुछ काम किया है अच्छा और 1 घंटे का इंटरव्यू अगर इंटेलिजेंट पैनल के सामने दिया जाए तो तुरंत आ जाएगा कि इस बंदे ने कुछ किया है कि नहीं किया है. तुरंत निकल आएगा 1 घंटे में कि इज ए स्पार्क इन हिज आइज और नॉट. वो पता चल जाएगा. एंड देन वी सिलेक्ट हिम फॉर द पोस्ट ऑफ जॉइंट सेक्रेटरी एंड अबाउ. आई एम श्योर मेनी ऑफ माई कलीग्स विल नॉट एग्री. इट्स अ वेरी डिफिकल्ट प्रपोजिशन, बट स्टिल आई एम जस्ट सजेस्टिंग. कस्टमर्स हैव टू बी गिवन द ड्राइवर सीट. कस्टमर के बारे में तो कोई नहीं चिंता करता. अनफॉर्चुनेटली गवर्नमेंट इज ऑब्सेस विथ इट्स ओन इंटरनल मैकेनिज्म रादर देन कस्टमर्स. एम्प्लॉइज़ का इंटरेस्ट तो सबसे सर्वोपरि होता है. वी लुक आफ्टर आवर ओन इंटरेस्ट वेरी वेल. सो इंस्टेड ऑफ सेइंग डेमोक्रेसी इज ए गवर्नमेंट ऑफ द पीपल, फॉर द पीपल, बाय द पीपल, इट बिकम्स ए गवर्नमेंट ऑफ द एम्प्लॉइज़, फॉर द एम्प्लॉइज़, बाय द एम्प्लॉइज़. ऐसा भी हो जाता है कभी कभी. बट वी हैव टू पुट कस्टमर इन द ड्राइवर्स सीट. वी हैव टू टेक कंटिन्यूअस कस्टमर फीडबैक, एंड वेर एवर पॉसिबल गिव कस्टमर्स ए चॉइस. हम सरकारी हॉस्पिटल या स्कूल बना के वाई डू वी फोर्स द चिल्ड्रन टू कम टू गवर्नमेंट हॉस्पिटल और गवर्नमेंट स्कूल्स ओनली. एक कैलकुलेशन हमने किया था गुजरात में. दिस वाज व्हेन आई वाज एजुकेशन सेक्रेटरी 2008. म्यूनिसिपल स्कूल ऑफ अहमदाबाद में जो बच्चे पढ़ते हैं उसमें एवरेज कॉस्ट ऑफ ए स्टूडेंट बीइंग एजुकेटेड इन ए प्राइमरी स्कूल ऑफ अहमदाबाद इन गवर्नमेंट स्कूल came to 11,000 rupees at that time, 2008 में. अभी अगर आप गिनेंगे तो कम से कम 25-30 हज़ार रुपया होगा. एवरेज कॉस्ट, टीचर सैलरी, मेंटेनेंस, एवरीथिंग इंक्लूडेड. तो एक बच्चे का अगर 25,000 रुपया हम स्पेंड कर रहे हैं और क्वालिटी अगर अच्छी नहीं है तो वाई डोंट वी गिव सिटीजन से चॉइस कि हम आपको 25,000 रुपये के स्कूल वाउचर देते हैं, आप कोई भी स्कूल में पढ़ा लो. खैर इसके भी चैलेंजेस है क्योंकि कंट्रोलिंग द कॉस्ट ऑफ प्राइवेट सेक्टर, हैविंग लॉट ऑफ प्राइवेट सेक्टर्स कॉम्पीट विद ईच अदर, ये सब जरूरी है. लेकिन हो सकता है. देयर इज अ गुड एग्जांपल ऑफ आयुष्मान भारत स्कीम वेयर वी आर saying that okay, you go to any hospital you like, empaneled hospital, private or public, take the services and we will pay the bill up to 5 lakh rupees. गरीब लोगों के लिए आयुष्मान भारत स्कीम है. Government foots the bill. So there is a wide variety of choice available for health services among the poor people now. So that kind of a giving choice in the hands of people will help good governance instead of forcing poor quality of services on the people. The organizations also have to be empowered properly. The employees have to be empowered. Communities have to be empowered in order to bring about good governance. We also have to change the organizational culture. क्योंकि सरकार की ऑर्गेनाइजेशन कल्चर जो है वो बिल्कुल अलग टाइप की है. इट्स मोर हायरार्किकल, लेस informal, it's more rigid and less informal. We can all try to make it very, very informal. एक दूसरे को सब लोग फर्स्ट नेम से बुलाए, एंजॉय करते करते काम करे, टीम वर्क करे. Instead of sitting in my room and pressing a bell, asking the peon to come and pick up my file to be given to the next fellow, if I walk out of my room, go to the desk, give him the file, ask him how are you, तो कितना अच्छा रहेगा. इस तरह की एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल कल्चर हमको डेवलप करनी चाहिए सरकार में, तभी थोड़ा इम्प्रूवमेंट आएगा. We as top officers are quite insulated, to be very frank. क्या लोग नीचे के कर रहे हैं कुछ पता ही नहीं है. जापानीज कॉन्सेप्ट है काइजेन, काइजेन का एक कॉन्सेप्ट है. काइजेन में बहुत सारी चीज़ें, उसमें से एक चीज़ ये भी है कि गोइंग टू द एक्चुअल प्लेस ऑफ वर्क, जहाँ काम हो रहा है वो नीचे के टेबल तक जाके देखो, उनसे बात करो, तब जाके इम्प्रूवमेंट होगा. बहुत ज़रूरी है. वी ऑल्सो नीड टू नो who our colleagues are. Most people at the top level, they are obsessed with their bosses rather than their subordinates. They take care of their bosses more than their subordinates, which is bad. We have to mix up among our lower level employees, create a good culture of knowing each other, helping each other, complimenting each other. हम जानते ही नहीं हैं. एक उदाहरण दूंगा जो मेरा एक्सपीरियंस था मोदी जी के बारे में. जब मैं उनका प्रिंसिपल सेक्रेटरी था गुजरात में, तो एक बार ऐसा हुआ कि उनके साथ फाइल वर्क हो रहा था. फाइल वर्क के बाद फिर पूरा हो गया तो मैं निकलने की तैयारी कर रहा था. तब उन्होंने बेल प्रेस किया और एक पियून आया, फाइल उठाया. फाइल का बंडल जो था वो उठा के ले गया. जैसे ही वो पियून बाहर गया, मोदी जी ने मुझे पूछा कि हसमुख भाई, इनको आप जानते हैं, ये बंदा जो अभी आया था? सो आई सेड नो सर, आई डोंट नो हिम. तो क्या बता रहे हैं मुझे कि देखो इसका नाम प्रताप है. ये प्रताप है ना, उसकी क्या एक ख़ास क्वालिटी आपको पता है? मैंने बोला नहीं, मुझे नहीं पता. तो बोले ये बहुत अच्छा हैंड राइटिंग करता है. उससे कभी अगर आपको लिखवाने का काम करना है, इनविटेशन कार्ड वगैरह, तो आप इनसे लीजिए, बहुत अच्छा हैंड राइटिंग करता है. आई वॉज शॉक्ड. इट वॉज ए न्यू एक्सपीरियंस फॉर मी कि कोई आदमी जो कि चीफ मिनिस्टर की सीट पर बैठा है, वो अपने पियून के बारे में समझे, सोचे और उसका प्रेज किसी दूसरे के पास करे. इट वॉज अनयूजुअल एक्सपीरियंस फॉर मी. टिल देन I had never cared to know even the names of my peons. Let me tell you, I was so ashamed. तो इसी को आगे बढ़ाना चाहिए. इसी को, इस तरह की कल्चर को अगर आगे बढ़ाएंगे तब जाके ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में इम्प्रूवमेंट होगा. ट्रेनिंग का मैंने जिक्र किया, बहुत ट्रेनिंग की ज़रूरत है. एक चीज़ मैं बताऊंगा कि ट्रेनिंग के बाद भी मोटिवेशन के फैक्टर बहुत कम रहते हैं सरकार में. देयर आर वेरी फ्यू फैक्टर्स टू मोटिवेट गवर्नमेंट एम्प्लॉयज़, क्योंकि उनका सैलरी फिक्स्ड है, पे कमीशन बढ़ाता रहता है, मेरिट बेस्ड प्रमोशन कम है. तो फिर क्या मोटिवेशन होगा? दूसरा कि ऊपर वाले किसी को अटेंशन फॉर डिटेल भी नहीं है. जैसे कुछ काम आया ऊपर से, मैं बड़ा सीनियर ऑफिसर हूँ, मेरे पास ऊपर से काम आया, तो मैं वो काम मेरे जो 2 एफिशिएंट ऑफिसर है उसी को दे दूंगा और वो किसी और से करवा लेंगे एफिशिएंट ऑफिसर से. देन आई डोंट बोदर कि किसने काम किया, किसने कितना अफोर्ड किया. मैं आई डोंट इवन बोदर. और जो बंदा रियली नीचे बैठा है और एक्चुअल काम कर रहा है उसको तो मैं जानता भी नहीं हूँ. तो मोटिवेशन के बहुत कम फैक्टर है सरकार में, क्योंकि इतना हार्ड वर्क करने के बावजूद भी लोगों को कोई स्पेशल रिकॉग्निशन नहीं है, स्पेशल पे नहीं है. तो मैं समझता हूँ एक ही टेक्निक इसमें काम करेगी और वो है कि सब एम्प्लॉई को हमारी जो एंशिएंट फिलोसॉफी में कर्मयोग का जो कॉन्सेप्ट है उसके बारे में बताया जाए. एंशियंट फिलोसफी में कर्मयोग का क्या मतलब है? कर्मयोग का ये मतलब है कि हर आदमी को अपना काम एफिशिएंटली करना चाहिए, with lot of attention, focus, and without carelessness, and without selfishness, and without ego. This is the short definition of Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga definition is doing one's work without carelessness, without selfishness, and without ego. इसी को कर्म योग कहते हैं. और हमें ये सिखाना पड़ेगा कि देखो, अगर कर्म आप योग की तरह करोगे, कर्म अगर आप योग की तरह करोगे, तो शायद आपका बॉस जो है वो आपको रिकॉग्नाइज नहीं करेगा, लेकिन वो पुण्य कर्म जो कर्म योग जनरेट करेगा वो ऊपर रजिस्टर होगा, और वो पुण्य कर्म जो है वो दूसरे माध्यम से आपको सुख के रूप में मिल जाएगा. बिकॉज हैप्पीनेस इज नॉट available to anybody. Happiness has no direct linkage of wealth or promotion or position. Happiness is experienced by people when there is a punya karma in your account. And if you want to build punya karma in your account, you have to do your work as yoga so that you don't have to do separate punya karma. जो काम है उसी को योग के रूप में करने से पुण्य कर्म जनरेट हो जाएगा, उसी से फिर सुख मिलता है. तो जितने भी सिंसियर गवर्नमेंट ऑफिसर्स है जिन्होंने कभी परवाह नहीं की है क्रेडिट पाने की या पोजीशन पाने की, वो सबको सुख तो जरूर मिला है भगवान की कृपा से. यही कॉन्सेप्ट से शायद मोटिवेशन आ सकता है सरकार में, ऐसा मेरा मानना है. Short tenure of government employee is a well-known phenomenon, all of you know. उसके लिए कुछ प्रावधान करना चाहिए मिनिमम. जैसे भारत सरकार में है कि कोई ऑफिसर अगर स्टेट से जाता है तो 5 साल तक भारत सरकार में काम कर सकता है शांति से, उसी तरह का स्टेट लेवल में भी कुछ होना चाहिए, मिनिमम टेन्योर का कुछ पोजीशन होना चाहिए. देयर इज ऑल्सो ए सजेशन कि एक इंडिपेंडेंट बोर्ड हो ट्रांसफ़र पोस्टिंग के लिए, जो डिसाइड करे कि मेरिट के आधार पे किसका पोस्टिंग कहाँ होगा, बट वो काम नहीं करेगा. Because ultimately a political accountability has to be there. एक डिबेट हमारे यहाँ चलता है कि who is more responsible for this state of affairs, politician or a bureaucrat? And the bureaucrats will try to pass the buck by saying कि no, political interference or politician. But I don't think so. The accountability of a political person is far greater compared to a bureaucrat. A bureaucrat has got a secure job. Under constitution, he cannot be removed without proper procedure. While politician has to go to people every 5 years and he has to get re-elected, otherwise he's out. So the accountability of political system is far greater in a democracy. And so I would think that we are more responsible as bureaucrats to improve the state of affairs. कोई भी bureaucrat अगर अपने suppose एक health secretary है कोई state में, वो अगर अपने state के primary health center की हालत सुधारना चाहता है तो कौन सा politician बीच में आएगा? जब एक health secretary अपने department की budget की file भेजता है minister को, उसको लगता है कि नहीं इस तरह से बजट स्पेंड होना चाहिए, लेट मी मेक दिस काइंड ऑफ प्रपोजल, तो मंत्री 1 मिनट में साइन करके वापस भेज देगा. वो क्यों रखेगा उसको इंटरेस्ट नहीं है उसमें. बट ब्यूरोक्रेसी कैन प्ले ए रोल. वी कैन अप्लाई आवर माइंड एंड सी टू इट कि एवरी पेनी इज वाइजली यूज्ड. सो देयर इज अ ग्रेटर अकाउंटेबिलिटी ऑफ पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम, एंड सो आई वुड लाइक टू टेक ऑनरशिप. आई वुड लाइक टू सॉर्ट ऑफ टेक द ऑनर्स ऑफ not doing anything on me rather than putting it on the political. I was lucky enough to work in a state where there is hardly any political interference. So is Maharashtra, so is many other states. I don't know about the other states. But at least I haven't faced any example of any political interference in my life. I always felt I had all the liberty to do whatever I wanted to do, but the time was too short for me, and one can do much more than this. तो ये संभव है करना। I would think that, as I told you, the system of open selection at the top level, and there also my suggestion is that at least 20% of the positions of Joint Secretary and above should be reserved for lateral entry by outsiders. That will bring in a lot of competition. Because कभी-कभी bureaucracy में complacency आ जाती है. IAS में आने के बाद या civil service में आने के बाद complacency आ जाता है. तो complacency दूर हो जाएगी. He will have to keep performing. He will have to show the results. He will have to prepare a good report card if he has to go up in hierarchy. And so not only there should be a selection procedure, independent selection procedure after Joint Secretary, but also 20% of the positions should be reserved for lateral entry. These are some of my suggestions. I don't think I'll take more time than this. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to reply to questions whenever it comes to question and answer. One last point. Although I've described the state of bureaucratic functioning, but I would like to say that there are many, many government officers and employees I've seen in the system who are putting in extremely hard work. In fact, it is because of the efforts of these 20%, 30% hardworking bureaucrats that the system is working very well. But what we need to do is to improve the remaining 70%. उनके पास से भी अगर काम लेंगे, अगर 30% लोगों के काम करने से इतनी अच्छी गुड गवर्नेंस है, तो बाकी के 70% में से अगर 10% भी improve हो जाए, तो we can do a lot. But जो employees और जो officers अच्छे से काम कर रहे, I would like to acknowledge their role. There are very many officers who are like that, and I really appreciate them. And we should try to encourage them, and we should try to encourage many others also to join this kind of set of officers. With this, I thank the university for calling me for this class, and my compliments to all of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful words. I think people like you who have actually shown examples of how good administration can be, it in itself is an inspiration to all our students who are sitting here and who have listened to you. Next, we have amongst us our special guest of honor, Dr. Sanjeev Chopra ji, former IAS officer and former director of the Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration. Before inviting him over to address the audience, may I request my technical team to kindly relay a short film on the life and work of Dr. Sanjeev Chopra ji.
Shri Sanjeev Chopra holds a PhD in management besides degrees in law, history, and literature. He is the recipient of the Robert S. McNamara Fellowship of the World Bank and the Hubert H. Humphrey Fellowship at the University of Cornell. He was also a guest scholar at the Brookings Institution, Washington, D.C. and attended the 21st Century Trust Fellows Program at Merton College, Oxford. He has written extensively on policy issues in governance and development interventions in rural development, agriculture, marketing reforms, cooperatives, and farmer organization. He has been invited to deliver lectures and talks at IIMs, ASCI, FRI, IGNFA, and symposia and conferences across the country. He served the government of Uttarakhand as the Secretary to the Industrial Development and Information Technology Departments. From 2007 till 2010, he was Principal Secretary to the Government of West Bengal in the Agriculture, Food Processing and Horticulture Department. He was also the Mission Director for the National Horticulture Mission and the National Mission on Micro Irrigation and Managing Director of the NAFED and National Horticulture Board, besides looking after international cooperation in the Ministry of Agriculture, Government of India. He has several books to his credit, including At the Crossroads, Development Discourses in India, Agri Matters, 10,000 Crores, besides 3 edited volumes on policy, colloquia, and cooperatives in the SAARC region. We warmly welcome Shri Sanjeev Chopra.
With a huge round of applause, let us welcome our special guest of honor, Dr. Sanjeev Chopra ji, to address the audience.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor and a privilege to address you all after my very distinguished colleague, Dr. Deshmukh. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chancellor, Dr. Chitnis. Thank you very much. We have with us Shri Anjit Nimbalkarji, the former Chief Secretary of Maharashtra and a legendary bureaucrat in his own right. We have with us Shri Mahesh Zagde, the Chairman of the PCGT Pune chapter. Thank you very much for being here. Shri Satish Khotji, Dr. Tapan Panda, Dr. Shalini Sharma, Dr. Ganesan. We have with us General Ashok Kapoor. We have with us Air Marshal A.K. Trikhar, Shri Satyabir Singh Dhod, and I find my friend from Oslo, Anju ji is here. I think Mr. Upadhyay is out somewhere, Shalini Rao and Rashmi Chopra ji. Friends, ladies and gentlemen. You see, one has to follow tradition. Now that he has dispensed with the formal draft, I shall have to follow suit, sir. So I will also leave the speech as a matter of record. And the work has become slightly easier because we've already discussed the life of Shri B.G. Deshmukh. Mr. Nimbalkar has worked with him, and therefore I have only read his books. I have only read, and I'm very glad that I got this opportunity because I wanted to read about him because he was the cabinet secretary when we were still in training. And the part of what we see today, the MCTPs, the mid-career training programs, those were started by him. And in fact, it was Mr. B.G. Deshmukh who brought the academy as a concept, you know, a training he felt was very important. So we'll talk about that. So what I have titled my talk is Governance Insights from the Life and Times of B.G. Deshmukh, the Steel Frame, Past, Present, and Forever. So like Mr. Deshmukh, I will begin by first paying my tribute and my regards to the late Mrs. Urmila Karad, and I join the family and all of us in paying my condolences to her, and we hope that the family can bear this with strength and fortitude. A few words about the MIT. I think the range of institutions, the number of courses, the initiatives that have been taken are certainly more than the universities that I have come across. And I think it's in the fitness of things that we are here in this auditorium, which is also called the MIT Peace University. And I think we need to build on many of the traditions that have already been set up here. And I'm very glad that you know, we are sitting in this hall which has the quotations from Bal Gangadhar Tilak ji and also from the great Saint Tukaram and Sant Gyaneshwar. Friends, let me start by saying that one of the first things which B.G. Deshmukh wrote in his book, to write or not to write. Now, he said that, and then he concluded and said that civil servants must write, because a civil servant is a witness to history, he's a participant, and unlike a journalist or a researcher, a journalist writes about things as they're happening, based on some interviews, some interactions, and a researcher goes into the past. But if somebody has to write about how things were happening, then who better than Mr. Deshmukh if one had to talk about demonetization? Because he was there. He was a part of the process. He understood the ecosystem, and therefore, I think the first point which Mr. B.G. Deshmukh made, and something which all of us must follow, is that we must record our memoirs. We must record the process of writing history, because it's very important, not only for the present generation, but also for future generations to set the record straight. Because a nation which forgets its own history does not and cannot really get into the future, because the past, present, and the future are all interconnected. They are fused. You cannot say this is where the past ends, this is, because everything is a living moment. And I think in that tradition, let me pay my tribute to the first Indian members of the ICS. The first Indian member of the ICS was Satyendranath Tagore, 1863. He was incidentally assigned to the Maharashtra, or then called he was a Bombay civilian. And he retired as the district judge of Satara. He did not, like his other batchmates, rise to be a member of the LG's council. He did not become the chief commissioner. But he wrote 12 books. And he translated Tilak. He translated Sant Tukaram. And he translated the Bhagavad Gita. And he wrote very extensively. And his contribution to the world of literature, to the world of philosophy, is so profound. 6 years later, 3 Indians again joined the ICS. Satyendranath Tagore, R.C. Dutt, and Bihari Lal Gupta. Surendranath Banerjee wrote a book called A Nation in the Making. At the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy of Administration, sir, we have created and curated a section which I would want the MIT also to emulate. It's called The Making of a Nation, in which all books written by all civil servants, the ICS officers, including the British and the European ICS officers, because we cannot forget the works of LSS O'Malley or Philip Woodruff, who wrote about the men who ruled India, who wrote about the tradition of valor in the Indian Army. So we've got a section there called The Making of a Nation. So he wrote A Nation in the Making, but the section is called The Making of a Nation because the nation, as was pointed out, is made by bureaucrats who are selected by the UPSC and the politicians who are selected by all of us. But the base of this is 2 institutions, the UPSC and the Election Commission. And it's a matter of great pride that throughout the world, it has been acknowledged that the selection process of the UPSC and the way elections are conducted in our country is far superior to any other parallel system. And you've seen what happened during the Trump presidency. They couldn't decide whether elections are fair or unfair. Today, we have a system in this country where everybody gets elected. I mean, you have a system where almost every political party in the country wins an election, either in the state or in the district council or in the national thing. So that comes about because the nation and the institutions of the nation are strong. And that is one of the things which Mr. B.G. Deshmukh has pointed out. You know, I must spend some time on Surendranath Banerjee because he was the person who started the whole tradition of public lectures in our country. Today, when we are doing the 11th B.G. Deshmukh Memorial Lecture here, let's go back to the times of Surendranath Banerjee. You know, he was eased out of the ICS on a very technical ground. But he made the point that the examination should be held in both England and India, because he felt that the process of going to UK to give the exam was a major challenge. And it took a lot of effort to get the government to agree that a parallel exam will be held in India also. And from 1922, the ICS exam started happening in both, in Allahabad University was the first place in India where the examination was held, along with the UK. But before that, something more remarkable had happened. And you will be very glad to know that the other Deshmukh, Mr. C.D. Deshmukh, topped the ICS exam in the year 1918. And it shook Europe, it shook all of England. How can a person from India come to England and clear the exam? Immediately followed by Mr. K.P.S. Menon. Mr. K.P.S. Menon then topped the ICS exam in 1921. Now, these were, at one level, we can say that these were not significant moments. But it was a very significant historic moment that you go to another ring and beat them at their own game. We bet the Europeans in their own game by appearing in examinations conducted by them. And of course, from 1922, when the exam started happening in India, the Britishers said that there will be 40% seats for India and 40% because we started succeeding more and more in the exam. So as a matter of fact, Even if the British rule had continued, I mean, just imagine theoretically that they had continued, the majority of the ICS would then have been composed of Indians. It would have been composed of Dutts and Chatterjees and Banerjees and Nimbalkars and Ambedkars and Bhaviskars and all of us. So as far as the intellectual competence or the intellectual merit or the ability to comprehend things is concerned, I think these early stalwarts established by the success in the comparative exams and by the quality of the writing. You see the writing. R.C. Dutt, for example, wrote the economic history of India, and he proved by facts and figures that the deindustrialization of India has happened because of the policies of the British India. So he was not arguing from the pulpit. He was not asking for a revolution by going to the streets. He was arguing on the basis of facts. And that is the great strength which the bureaucracy can bring. If you argue with facts and figures, as Mr. Adia pointed out, if you argue your case with facts and figures, it will be very difficult for the political leadership or the political executive to overrule you. But the point is that requires a lot of hard work. That will require that we will have to put in much more effort than we are currently doing. Friends, again going back to what Mr. Deshmukh's point, that if we want to understand contemporary history, we cannot do it without understanding what the senior civil servants have written. And let me talk about Punjab, the state that I come from. Very recently, Mr. B.D. Pandey, also from the ICS, has written the book In the Service of a Free Nation. And in this book, he had mentioned that, this book should be published only after his death because he didn't want to hurt anyone. But in this book, there's a chapter on Punjab, and in that chapter on Punjab, he has clearly mentioned the failure of the political imagination at the top, the way in which the Punjab situation was handled, and he made this point. He says that, first of all, do not make promises which you do not want to fulfill. If you have made promises, then fulfill them. Like the case of Chandigarh, for example, why was it announced that it will be given to Punjab? If you say it will be given to Punjab, then you don't give it to Punjab. And he made the point that whenever politicians look only to the next elections, then believe you me, that politicians will only win 1 or 2 elections. Only those political leaders who can think beyond the next election, they'll be able to rise and move higher and greater. These are all insights from the works of Mr. B.G. Deshmukh. I'll not talk about his life because Mr. Nimbalkar has talked about it. But generally, they say that there are 3 positions which are very important in the country: the PM, the CM, and the DM. Now, almost all IAS officers manage to become DMs because unless you've done something exceptionally wrong, you'll agree with me, sir, unless somebody has really mucked it up, and there are 4 of us sitting here, unless somebody really decides not to become a district magistrate, he becomes a district magistrate, and that's an important milestone in one's career. We all like to say, when I was DM here, when I was DM there. In fact, in the academy, they used to make fun of me because I always used to begin my lectures by saying, when I was DM of Murshidabad, then I did this, and then this happened. As if, but that's a very important thing. But, with the case of Mr. B.G. Deshmukh, he had the privilege of working with the CM and also with the PM. And I think that was very important. That gave him an insight and an oversight and an overview which few IAS officers had. And I think he's also made a very important point. And that is that in the course of a country, we've never given importance to the initiatives which have been taken by state leadership, whether it is the state leadership of VP Nayak. The EGS program was started by Mr. VP Nayak in Maharashtra to combat the grave situation of drought. It is the EGS which is the foundation of the right to work and the right to food. I mean, today we all talk of Manrega with great pride, but we have to go back, and it's very important because if these things are not recorded and not documented, people will forget how the EGS started. Like the points which he made, Mr. Deshmukh Adia made about Gujarat, the initiatives which you've taken. So another point which comes out is that a lot of initiatives that have taken place in the state governments are then accepted by the government of India, then they become mainstream. So that's something which I thought I'll bring to your knowledge and notice. Mr. Deshmukh was at the helm during the turbulent 80s. There's a book that's written which is called The Most Dangerous Decade by Selig Harrison. And he said that perhaps 50s was the most dangerous decade. But I think, in retrospect, the 80s was perhaps the most dangerous decade. you look at Punjab, Jammu Kashmir, left-wing extremism, Assam, Gorkhaland, Tripura, 80s was perhaps the most difficult period. Along with that, that was a time when our paramilitary forces were in great turmoil. The revolt in the CRPF, revolt in the CISF, a great problem in the BSF. So at that point of time, Mr. Deshmukh was helming the Ministry of Home Affairs, and he tried to ensure that there is a greater parity and greater set of things. Because, again, these are not things which make news. Part of the job of a bureaucrat is to ensure that news is not made, you know? Because if news is made, if things have gone wrong, if they've gone out of control, then there's no news. Actually, there's no news. If the fire brigade says that we have prevented 150 fires, there is no news. But if there is a fire, I mean, if the police has been successful in controlling a riot, if we've been able to prevent something from happening, if we've been able to, I mean, and the fact that, you know, there is no polio cases now in this country, that does not make news. But the fact that some of our neighboring countries, polio is still an important factor, that makes news. So that is, so part of the job of the bureaucracy is to create the background situation that negative news is not created. But unfortunately, that's the logic of news is that that is there. But let's move on to the next point, the new economic policy of the Government of India, which happened in 1991. And by that time, he had moved out of the government. But his B.D. Shroff Memorial Lecture, the 27th A.D. Shroff Memorial Lecture. And I think, you know, these memorial lectures are very good because these compel both Mr. Adia and me to, you know, we have to do a lot of background work to do these lectures, even though we may not read all of it because we know that, you know, the attention span is short and people want to go and have their cup of tea or whatever. But in that A.D. Shroff Memorial Lecture, he said that, you know, he made the distinction between the reforms in Russia and the reforms in India. He said that he was looking at why is it that glasnost and perestroika could not succeed. They could not succeed because Russia could not develop an institutional base for these reforms. India had certain advantages. We always had our corporates. We always had a JRD. We always had a Birla. We always had our Mafatlals, we had the Ambanis, so we should not be critical of our private. These are the ones because of whom they were able to step. And he pointed out the role of IIMs. So he pointed out the role of IIMs, he pointed the role of ASCI, and he said, hats off to the LBS, because the LBS Academy also ran back-to-back courses on the Asian tigers. And it is because of this creation of that mahal. Because unless, you cannot do reforms unless the mahal has been created. Actually, what did the Prime Minister do on the 15th August? He said Swachhata Abhiyan. Now, this does not mean that the Prime Minister himself went and started doing everything, but he created that environment. He created that mahal in which everybody from the, LBS Academy to here to all municipal corporations, and I find the mayors of most cities saying that my shahar should be the best, mera shahar sabse sundar, sabse acha. Now whether it becomes or it doesn't become, that's another matter. But the aspirations have started. So that is the importance of public communication, and that is where he drew the attention that the NEP, to his mind, became successful largely because the bureaucracy was able to put its best foot forward. The mission Karma Yogi, about which my senior colleague talked about, the process was started by Mr. B.G. Deshmukh when he insisted, and he says, take 1 week off only to read books. 1 week off from your job only to read books, because a country where the top bureaucracy and the top generals do not read books, they will then be, and reading does not mean that you read the daily, it means that read a seminal work, read the end of history, or read, whatever. But if you were to read, for example, if you were to read the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, you get an insight into how empires build and how empires decline. So that was very important. So I think I like to pay my tribute to him for beginning and for thinking of the whole concept of Mission Karma Yogi. In his times, and he talks about the, few of us would remember that during the Kuwait crisis, the Ministry of External Affairs had one policy. The Ministry of Defense didn't know what's happening. The Ministry of Petroleum said what's going to happen to petroleum, because the MEA took an independent decision. independent of the cabinet secretariat, independent of the PMO, and that is where he started thinking that there should be something like the NSA, the National Security Agency, to which his batchmate Brijesh Mishra was the first occupant. And since then, the NSA has become the central point where the Defense Ministry, the External Affairs Ministry, the Economic Ministry, and all the ministries come together. And I think it's very important that we move out of our silos. There's a book written by Mr. Vinay Gokhale now on the long game of China, on the how China strategizes itself. Now, I feel that it's a book which is meant not only for the IFS, but also for the economic ministry. Because unless you know how to negotiate with China, unless you understand their tactic of how to deal with things, you know, and the Chinese have a very nice way. I mean, they could be our adversaries, but I think one of the important things is that we have to learn from our adversaries. And one thing is that we've learned from the Chinese strategy. Because after 1962, we have beaten the Chinese at their own game in negotiations. Sikkim was recognized as a part of India. It's a tribute to Indian diplomacy, to Indian, things, these are all things which we do not really, China, which we've still not settled our LAC with China, but as far as Sikkim is concerned, we were able to get that. We were able to get the nuclear deal done. We've been able to get Masood Azhar declared as a terrorist. It's only because we have learned. And these are all the points which he likes to make. Now, friends, another point which he made is that, it is high time that India recognized that Pakistan is not the major challenge. The challenge is China. Whether or not the House agrees or whether or not our political leadership will agree, he was in favor that we should settle the LOC but contest the LAC, because he felt that as far as Pakistan is concerned, in spite of the fact that it's a deep state, we got to settle. That's Mr. Deshmukh's point. But the point is, his point was that let not your present be a prisoner of the past. And I think it's a very important insight, not just vis-a-vis our relationship with Pakistan or China, but vis-a-vis anything. Let not the present be a prisoner of the past. Now let me come to the final part of the thing. Why do I say that the civil service is forever? Why do I say that the steel frame is forever? Because let's go to the dictionary definition of steel. Steel, as you know, is a compound of iron and carbon. So it's malleable, it's tensile, it's got strength, it's got viscosity, and few of us would realize that it's one of the most recycled and recyclable material. 60% of steel is recycled, but 99% of it is recyclable. Therefore, as he said, that if the civil service has to evolve, if we have to take up the challenge of lateral entry, and I quite agree with him, that why should you not be selected? Why should you not? And I must tell you that, sir, the recent step of the Government of India, in which the Undersecretary will send files only to the Joint Secretary. So Undersecretary, Deputy Secretary, Director, all of them will send files only to Joint Secretary. And both Joint Secretaries and Additional Secretaries will send files only to the Secretary. By this one decision of the government, can you imagine that when I was the mission director, the file would move from the Undersecretary to the Deputy Secretary stroke Director to me, and from me to the Additional Secretary, and then to the Secretary. Now this 5 process has been cut down into, and these are all things which, as conscious thinking civil servants, we must continually evolve. And there is no problem to it. I mean, there is no political problem if the files move straight. And that is something that we got to understand, not only in civil services, but also in the army and the police, where the hierarchy seems to be, the hierarchy has become an end in itself. If we have to compare ourselves with the police forces or with the armed forces, I mean, look at the number of ranks in the Metropolitan Police, or the ranks in the PLA or the Israeli army. The two most efficient armies in the world is the Israeli army and the PLA, 5 ranks. We've got 13 ranks. Now you cannot, the 13 ranks were required for the 18th and the 19th century. Can you have 13 ranks in the 21st century? These are all things which you must think of, but let's get back to why I feel that the civil services, or especially the All India service, will be forever. In the academy, we sing the song, sir would remember, Nana Bhasha, Nana Mat, Nana Paridhan, Bibither Majhe Dekho Milan Mahan. That this civilizational country, which has such a wide diversity of languages, such a wide diversity of creeds, such a wide diversity of thoughts, such a wide diversity of sartorial preferences, we are together. You know, let me take you to a situation in Darjeeling in the year of the Lord 1986, peak of the GNLF agitation. The district administration, the divisional commissioner was from Mizoram, the DAG was from Haryana, the DM was from Odisha, his ADMs were from UP and Bihar, I was from Punjab, you know, and my other colleagues, you know, so Maharashtra, my batchmate Bhaviskar was there as the SDM. So we were there from all across the country. So everybody from across the country is there to ensure that the Tiranga flies on the district magistrate's office. So that is the strength. That is the strength. So all of us together. So that is the biggest strength of the civil services, that we come from all across the country. We work together for a common objective. Friends, governance is a complex of three things. There is Prabhu Shakti, which is the power of the sovereign. There is Mantrana Shakti, which is the power of thought and deliberation and advice. And there is a third Shakti, which is called the Utsaha Shakti. Now, the Prabhu Shakti will be with the political sovereign, and it should be with him. But the Mantrana Shakti is with us. And if we do not exercise that Mantrana Shakti, the problem doesn't lie there, the problem lies with us. And the third is Utsaha Shakti. How enthusiastic I am, and that's the point which Mr. Adia was also averring to. Am I enthusiastic in doing my job, or am I taking it as part of the job? That is the third challenge that we have for us. You know, 2019 or 20, Mr. Rajiv Gauba, our present cabinet secretary, had come to the academy, and this talk about lateral entry, and you know, mid-career officers are very concerned about, you know, this will go and that will go and that will go. So he told them, he says, remember that anybody can be a specialist in anything, but only you can be the specialist of the context. Who will set the context? The context has to be set by the civil service. And remember, there is a very interesting book by Arif Muhammad Khan Sahib, the governor of Kerala. His book is Text and Context. And he says, the context is more important than the text. Because whatever your intervention, whatever you might want to do, it is the context which matters. And the All India services provide the context to anything that this nation has to do. And last but not the least, you know, the strength of these services, the All India services, is that there's a churn. Every year there is a new set of people who comes, and there's a set of people who are now required only to give public lectures. So we are all now in that advisory board. So, you know, every year, and this happens only with us, because in the case of a politician, there is no guarantee that every year 800 bright, in spite of the youth parliament, in spite of what the MIT is trying to do, it's a great initiative. But in the case of civil services, 800 bright young women and men will come and inject fresh blood into the system. And that is what will make it and keep it young forever. Thank you very much. Jai.
Thank you so much, sir, for that very wonderfully crafted and inspirational address. I'm sure that all the students have taken each and every word of yours and etched in their minds. Due to paucity of time, we'll be cutting short the Q&A to only 2 questions. I request Shri Satish Kodji, Vice Chairman of PCGT, to take 2 questions from the audience and wind it up in the next 5 minutes.
PCGT always likes to hear from you, because you are the ones who are going to give a new idea to what is being discussed. How you accept it and take it forward is very important. Today we don't have the time to listen to you, but what we are suggesting is, please ask your questions, write them down, give it to your office, and we will see that you will get answers from that. Right now I'm just going to ask 2 questions, which we have said that there has been a lot of talk about it. I think Mr. Ade has said something, which I'm going to put it to Ms. Chopra. He had said something about why do you need to why not get more injection of more people into a higher ranks? So it is today everyone is talking about Agnipath. So why not look at it like Agnipath? And you have people who you have for up to say age 30, 40, and they go, and you get newcomers who will climb up the ranks. Why can't we do a Agnipath in the administrative and other services? Your question? No, I think it is a question of.
No, so I think what Mr. Adia referred to was getting 20% people at the very top, which is a very different concept than the concept of Agnipath. The Agnipath is to recruit a lot of people and then select some of them and, then retain some of them. These are two different concepts.
Exactly.
I, for one, would strongly agree with him that 20% at the top in the services should come in from lateral entry. That is a very viable and a very doable thing. But unlike the Agnipath, I think as far as, running the districts and various other things are concerned, people will have to be trained. So we'll have to, think more about that aspect. But as far as the first part is concerned, about lateral entry, I would certainly agree that there is time to do that. And I think deep selection that is now being thought of, that after the rank of Joint Secretary, or even some posts in the Joint Secretary, let them be openly advertised. Let them be openly advertised, that people ask for those positions, and that will be better. Because unfortunately what happens is that many of us get posted to a department which they don't want to. So I think it's a very positive step.
It is a positive thing, which we can, so you can call it a different kind of Agnipath as such to take it in.
Agnipath is very different, sir. So
No, but why not? There will definitely be some people who are, well, not
Yes,
being
they
what you want them to be. So would it not be better to have that moving away and get a new, if you're taking 500 people, take 600 people at the first shot and have 100 people to be dropped out later on, etc. So you will keep the best going further and further. That's what was thought about Agnipath, and that's what I think about here. Okay, we can discuss this. We can discuss this later.
We can
also.
discuss this, sir. But again, the point is that the selection in the IAS is very limited. I mean, there are only 800 people who make it every year to the through the civil services. So I'll have to give a greater thought.
Okay, we'll talk about it.
I'll discuss.
I think, sir, you were finance secretary, and this is something which everyone has been talking about in the media, etc. Is that we had done, what would you call that, demonetization had been done some years back. Was it a success? Did it reach its goal? What can be said about it? Or should we just ignore what happened and let it be?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that I'm not trying to disown it, but just to bring correct facts on the table. Demonetization was a scheme which belonged to the Department of Economic Affairs. I was only Revenue Secretary that time. I was not in the Department of Economic Affairs. The second fact is that, yes, it doesn't mean that as Revenue Secretary I was not consulted about it. There were discussions for 6 months prior to that at the top level. I was part of that group of few people who were privy to this discussion. I was only a part of the group. But the actual concept and the implementation belonged to Department of Economic Affairs.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, Mr. Shaktikant Das, the present governor, he was the secretary, but that doesn't matter. Point is ki it's something which I cannot own up as my initiative or my this thing. I was only one of the people who were being consulted in the process. But you can say GST happened directly under my supervision. So
Yes.
that's one reform for which I feel very proud. And I feel that I have done my best in implementing GST there.
Yes.
I don't want to give any value judgment or any deterministic answer on whether or not demonetization was a success or not. Well, it is for people to judge, but one thing which has happened It's possible. In public policy, we have many cases where sometimes the entire set of expectations don't come true. We have certain expectations in mind out of a policy action, and many of them sometimes do not come true. It is possible, and that's where sometimes we have to be prepared to accept the results as they are. But one thing which has happened since demonetization in our country is that we have digitized our payment system significantly. If you see the number of UPI transactions, it has really increased tremendously. It is going up by leaps and bounds. So that's the best thing which has happened. There is more formalization of economy now. Lot of small and medium traders are also accepting electronic payment, which has brought to light the entire turnover of business. The GDP will be counted very well because of the formalization of economy. And also the tax recovery will be better because of that. So we cannot take benefit of demonetization in the year following it. We have to also look at the long advantage, the long-term advantage of this initiative. You've been seeing the tax figures of last 2 years, particularly last year. Last year was a phenomenal year of revenue growth for Government of India. Both the income tax, personal income tax, there was a maximum increase in personal income tax, and also the GST growth now. What does it indicate? It indicates that the economy is now formalized. There is no way people can avoid taxes, and the taxes have to be paid. So it's because of this initiative that now, because of formalization of economy, and because of electronic payment being resorted to, and the reduction in the cash payment, this is what is happening. Okay.
Thank you very much, sir, because this kind of an answer is necessary to keep some devil at rest and look forward to going ahead. Thank you very much. I think both of you answered the question very well. I'm sorry, but we have to thank these gentlemen first for being so open and talking to us, and I would like to close it here. We'll get questions from everyone else and we'll bring it to you and we'll let you know. Because I don't think these youngsters are going to let you go on so easily. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. May I now invite Dr. Tapan Panda, sir, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor of MIT-WPU University, for the concluding remarks.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, we have our distinguished guests on dais, Dr. Deshmukh and Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, and other members present here. That's a tough task to bring in concluding remarks in a couple of minutes. But the good part of the story is that we have two management professors here, two management scholars here. And one where I taught, I am Bangalore. Other one is agriculture marketing in the domain where I work. I could see your books which are there. So that makes my job very easy. One of the key things to learn from this conversation today is the difference between a politician and a bureaucrat, because politicians will normally lament about what are the gaps there. Doesn't matter which party they belong to whenever they get into the dais. But there is a solution that's always prescribed by the bureaucrats. If you listen to Dr. Chopra's conversations, he was talking about Mantrana Sakti. I could see that one in the reflections when Dr. Deshmukh was talking about the suggestion part of his speech. He talked about 4 things. What is the present status of governance? Then what's actually a good governance? What are the challenges that we are facing in the governance? And what are the suggestions? I could read out that there are 7 or 8 of these governance suggestions that he has given. And many of them that he learned at IIM Bangalore in the course of public policy. And he practiced that into the domain of governance that has come into the process there. One of the key things that he suggested, there is no absolute solution, because he was referring about Kaizen as a technique to follow. So once you are following Kaizen, it's a process of continuous improvement. So Dr. Deshmukh's speech can be summarized by not only he was trying to paint the elephant into a different color, but he's also suggesting us how to make the elephant dance. So that's the beauty of his talk that we have found here in the conversation. There are many things that he talked about. For example, he said, sometimes, when you look at people, you can identify that they're also thinkers, the way they think about it. He gave a very interesting statement where he said that happiness is an experience. Happiness cannot be a function of your material success, but it can be a domain of your experience. And he brought the idea of Karma Yoga into his conversations in this part. Dr. Sanjeev Chopra took us through a long history. It's a longitudinal experience that he shared because of the reading part of it. Though I have a couple of civil servant friends, I didn't know that all of them read so much the way you have read about that part. It's quite well reflected. One of the key statements that he talked about to start with, to write or not to write, because he referred about three kind of people, those who write. Of course, I'm one of those who look back as a researcher and see what happens there. But one of the things is that those who are making the process, when they start writing it, they are the evidence, because they create the evidence and they witness the evidence part of it. That's very interesting for the students to learn from this conversation. One interesting thing that he talked about is that the bureaucrats create the background so that there is no bad news. That's an interesting part of it. This drives to one idea that public policy making has to be inclusive in character. A lot of students know their favorite food is Maggi noodles. And what happened with Maggi when Mr. Yudhvir Singh was on the other side, because I was on the other side of Maggi in that story there. So what happened during that period of time? This gives us an idea that when you form your public policy, your public should be inclusive, and you include all the stakeholders into the process. Somewhere the hierarchical governance process has to break down to a horizontal process. So everybody who are part of stakeholders can be taken care in the process. Second part that he talked about, the public communication. How do you really build aspirations in public communication? That's an interesting factor there. In IIMs, we do a program called VIP program. It doesn't stand for very important person. It says vertical interaction program, whereby I get in from SP level to the Director General Police, people come to the campus. I understand there are certain exercises where you also take the young IS officers and they get a chance to interact with the senior bureaucrats as head of the school that you are doing it. And the final part, he talked about the definition of steel and how steel is a compound and 99% can be recycled. It has two sides of the story, that as a bureaucrat, they have to adjust to the different philosophies and governance of the political parties, those who govern. But in the process, they also build the nation. So there's a list of books that he has prescribed, which I'll suggest my students to look at. So as concluding remarks, one important thing that we need to talk about is obviously inclusive public policy. The second part is a small part of this conversation was about those institutional voids. You can make great policies, but you need right organization structure to implement them. And most of the developing nations have those kind of institutional voids. I think in the conversations you have also referred about what happened in UK and how they have tried to separate out authorities so that somebody who does the policy planning, he doesn't look into the implementation or the evaluation part of it. So if you can think on those lines as a scholar, as a student, as you go forward, what kind of institutional voids are there and how it can be solved by the process there. Essentially, there are four kind of institutional voids. We have something like a product-related institutional voids, which is actually a policy domain. A market-related institutional voids, we understand that for success of any business enterprise, there are two important factors. You take care of the information asymmetry, and you take care of the market dysfunctionality. I know Dr. Chopra's work is more on the market dysfunctionality and how do you solve that part for the agri-markets which you have got there. To summarize, there also has to be a responsive governance, and the responsive governance has to focus on efficiency and effectiveness, openness and transparency, and both of them highlighted about measuring talent and not making into a time-bound exercise for the people there, and overall, a greater accountability. I understand technology is going to be a reality because last part of the conversation was about, the question was about how do you really go and look into the digital payments. I think cash is always a leakage in the economic system as a management professor. As soon as you take away the cash and you make the transactional formal, it strengthens your system, it strengthens your economy, which we have seen. The fact which Dr. Deshmukh presented talked about both of them. More than that, human rights, cultural diversity, and social cohesion. These are the responsibilities of both people at the political side as well as your bureaucratic side. Thank you, sir, for your presence here and for these great ideas that you have given to us.
Thank you, sir, for those wonderful concluding remarks. May I now invite the Dean of School of Public Policy and Economics, MIT-WPU University, Professor Dr. Shalini Sharma, ma'am, for delivering the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Anuradha. First of all, I thank Goddess Saraswati that today we had the blessings of Goddess Saraswati here and we had the rain of knowledge coming to all of us. We are highly grateful to our esteemed dignitaries, all of them who have spread the knowledge today here. Sir, let me share with you that at MIT, our endeavor is to create ambassadors of change. And your thoughts that you have shared with the youth today is definitely going to create those change ambassadors. Thank you so much. I thank Dr. Deshmukh to come here and share his thoughts with us. We are highly grateful to Dr. Sanjeev Chopra ji that he could come and enlighten our youth. Shri Mahesh ji, Shri Ajit ji, Shri Satish ji, Mrs. Rashmi ji, Mrs. Shalini ji, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, Dr. Tapan Panda ji, Dr. Girisan sir, the veterans of the armed forces, my esteemed colleagues, and very, very enthusiastic students. Thank you so much for all of you for being here and making this program a great success. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. May I now request all of you to rise in your seats for the national anthem. Thank you all. Thank you once again. I request all the dignitaries to kindly give us a moment to take a group photograph of all of you together. Okay? Thank you all.